All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to LinkedIn Live Leadership number 18. Slight change of plan this week. We're going to talk about recurring revenue in business and your role as a leader in that particular area. But I had a really interesting session with a client last week where we talked a little bit about charisma and charismatic leadership. And I thought I would just share those things that came out of that session with you because it is a really important topic in leadership. So my name is Gary Crosby. I'm an action coach, business coach here in the office in Peterborough this week. And the aim of this series is really simple. I want to share leadership ideas with you from my time in the Royal Air Force, 31 years in the Royal Air Force, some time in the corporate world doing sales, marketing and strategy, and my time as a business coach, where I help business owners to get clarity about what they want to achieve, get them really focused on what's important in the business, lots of action so that they can get results. And for many of those, that's a leadership journey as well, going from doing the do in their business to being the leader of their business. So that's what I want to share with you. At the end of this, I want you to just log out thinking, well, I've learned something really useful here. That's something I might take another look at for me and how it will affect me in my business. So give me a thumbs up if you're watching so that I can see that you're all connected. Type in the comments where you're connecting from. That's also useful for me to know where the audience is. And today, as I said, we're going to look at charisma and particularly what that means for you as a leader in your organization, in your team, or in your business. Now, what we do know is that charisma originated as a Greek word. It meant divinely inspired gift, and it was normally reserved for people who had done something extraordinary, people who could deliver miracles effectively, and they were labeled with this idea of being very charismatic. The more modern definitions, of course, are around things like, compelling attractiveness or a charm that inspires others or devotion in others. That's a common definition. And you might also use words yourself like magnetism or allure if you're defining somebody who's got that natural charisma. So let's just take a quick look at some of the research and then I can show you some examples of this too. So when I was looking at the research in the books and online as well, it was clear that charismatic leaders were people who advocated a vision. And that was really important because you're inspiring and enrolling people to follow you in achieving that vision. It was also clear that charismatic leaders sometimes use slightly unconventional methods, so there might be the sort of people who would bulldoze through an old process and get something achieved in a slightly different way. And interestingly, it also showed this research that charismatic leaders often make a lot of self-sacrifice or take personal risk in achieving the goal. And when other people see that, that's defined as something, their investment, their emotional involvement in it is seen as something that is very charismatic. And naturally, you'd expect that charismatic leaders are very confident, they're very enthusiastic, and that's really important because that can be contagious in any team or organization, of course. And charismatic leaders appeal to the emotion of the people that are following them, and they have a knack of making people feel really included and really important. So the research is nice and clear, lots of really strong leadership traits in there that would allow you to be perceived as being charismatic. Now, it's worth pausing here just for a second. If you noted those down or you're watching this later on a replay, just give yourself a little score out of 5 against those kind of characteristics. I'm not saying there's a good and a bad score, but it might just help you to see where you are in relation to the way the research views people as being charismatic. I'll show you some tips with you in a minute as well, where we can show how you might be able to make improvements in some of those areas. So let's have a look at some examples from history. I'm going to start with the most famous one of all. I don't make any excuses for this, but it is a really good example. We have to go back, right, to the late 19th century. There's a general election in the UK, and there are 2 candidates to become Prime Minister. William Gladstone is one, and Benjamin Disraeli is another. And Jenny Jerome, Winston Churchill's mother, decides to go out for dinner with these 2 gentlemen separately. And she does that in the week before the election, and she's asked by a journalist afterwards, so give us your first impressions of these 2 gentlemen. They're competing to be Prime Minister. And she says, when I left the dining room after sitting next to Gladstone, I felt like he was the cleverest man in England. And when I left the dining room after sitting next to Disraeli, I thought I was the cleverest person in England. Now, Disraeli went on to win that election, and maybe he was just secretly demonstrating one of the really key traits of charismatic leaders, and that is that they make other people feel brilliant, respected, and important. And we'll return to that again and again over the next few minutes. So another leader that was really admired for his charisma and for a couple of other things, of course, was Bill Clinton. And people who've been in the room with Bill Clinton often reported on how charismatic he was. One person said He looks at you like you're the most important the person he's talked to that day. And even though you know that you're not, you still feel like you are. So what kind of skill is that to make people feel that important? In my own Air Force career, I knew quite a few leaders, many of them charismatic, of course. Some were good, if a little unconventional. And often I followed them out of curiosity because we were just trying to work out whether it was going to be a disaster or a triumph. But one person sticks out in my memory. I worked for him in the late 1990s. He was a wing commander at the time. You couldn't miss him. He had a laugh like a braying donkey. So if ever he was in the room, you knew he was there. But whenever I spoke to him, I always came away from the conversation thinking I was the most important person in that moment that he had spoken to. And again, that is a rare talent that charismatic leaders have. Now, for some naturally attractive, because physical attractiveness has got a role to play here too, but some naturally attractive and charismatic leaders, these kind of traits don't seem like too much of a stretch. But what happens if you're not that person? Yeah, if you're not naturally charismatic, can you actually learn to be more charismatic? Well, let's just level the playing field slightly before we get to those tips that I've got for increasing levels of perceived charisma. And that is that other research that's being done on charisma is quite clear that actually it might be in the eye of the followers. Okay, so you can have some attributes as a leader, but it'll be the followers themselves who decide whether you're charismatic or not. And we all know in business, it's something that everybody should be very well aware of. Some people are going to love you and your product, and some people aren't. So maybe when you look at your followers, you'll be seeing how they are perceiving you as charismatic or not charismatic. All right, so let's have a look at 5 areas where I think I'll share these with you. And if you work on these areas, it's likely to increase the perception of others that you are a charismatic leader, okay? So the first one is create that vision that your team can buy into. And how you do this and how you communicate this is really, really important. It's not got to be tiny little incremental steps. It's not got to be something so outlandish that everybody knows it's completely impossible to achieve that. You're really just creating a vision that feels like a positive transformation for you and the team and that has a positive outcome. You know, there are parts of transformational leadership embedded in this simple first step. So be really careful about the time and effort you spend in crafting that vision. Number 2 in the list is deliver that vision or lead into that vision with as much energy and passion as you possibly can. If you have a clear and obvious passion for your work, then that's going to rub off on other people, and that's going to be a really important part of your leadership and how you're perceived. Your energy is contagious for everybody in that team. It'll be increasing the chances that you'll be perceived as a charismatic leader. And then there's a slightly dark flip side to this, isn't there? That if you don't have a clear vision and you don't have passion for what you do, and you can't put energy into what you can do, then it's almost certain that you're not going to be viewed as a charismatic leader. But it begs a much bigger question. Are you actually in the right place? Because if you can't summon up that energy and passion, then it's unlikely that that's going to rub off on anybody else. So careful thought there about where you are. Number 3 is all about appealing to your team's emotions, right? So whatever emotions they're experiencing right now, there might be another set of emotions that you want to appeal to. And a really good example of this is when I was in the Air Force. I was commanding officer of one of the Air Force's frontline flying squadrons, and we were in the process of introducing a new aircraft into service. This aircraft here, in fact, was being introduced into service. And 175 people scattered across 3 continents. Some people were spending 30, 60, 90, a full year away from their families in the pursuit of the acquisition of this platform and everything that was involved in it. But for me and my team of the executives, what we really wanted to appeal to was the emotion of what it would be like at the end of this process. And we used to say to the people who were involved, imagine in a couple of years' time, we're sitting in our brand new crew room in our brand new hangar, and we look out of the window and there's parked on the aircraft standing outside a brand new aircraft, one of the most technologically advanced capabilities in the Royal Air Force. How is that going to feel when you're not spread across 3 continents? You're flying from your home base. And so if you can appeal to your followers' emotions in this way, then that's a good way of making a connection and being perceived as a charismatic leader. Now, number 4 is an interesting one. I call it mastering your human skills. Every leadership course will talk about this, but it is really vitally important. Really focusing on human beings, listening more than you talk, and not lighthousing. Have you heard the phrase lighthousing? That's when you're standing talking to somebody, but you're actually looking around the room. trying to find somebody more interesting to talk to, and imagining how that person standing in front of you is feeling. Lighthousing is a terrible way to treat somebody. Be curious, be really humble, ask questions about that person, get focused on the other person, be Bill Clinton, be Benjamin Disraeli, be that person that makes that person feel really, really important. Remember their name, right? It's the most important trigger we've got in our human lives. When we hear our name, we're instantly perking up to paying attention and being involved. So that was number 4. The final one, number 5, is to shine a Klieg light on others, right? And that might be a term you've never heard before, Klieg light, but think of a movie that you've watched that was made by 20th Century Fox or 21st Century Fox, and they've got the building with the name on at the start, and the searchlights are panning across the front. Those lights are Klieg lights. They're cinematic arc lights that are very, very powerful. And when you shine that light on somebody else, it means that for your team, you're going to be giving them some kind of praise, right? Just an individual or the team as a whole or a part of a team, shine that Klieg light as often as you can. And at the same time, don't be afraid to admit some of your own failings if you've taken your eye off the ball. And if the team as a whole takes a fall for some reason, absolutely 100% take all of the blame yourself. Any attempt to deflect that blame is going to be a very bad thing indeed. And you certainly won't be considered as a charismatic leader if you do that. So that's the kind of activities, those 5 things I think would allow your followers to perceive you as a more charismatic person, even if natural charisma isn't something that you've got. That's a very, very quick run through charisma. There's tons of research on and offline. The bottom line for me is, your team decides if you have charisma. Some will love you, some won't love you. Lead with vision, lead with energy, lead with passion, appeal to your followers' emotions. There's a great chance that you'll be perceived as more charismatic if you really learn to focus on people, no lighthousing, really, really listening to what people are saying, being curious about them, giving praise, taking blame. So give me a thumbs up if that was useful for you, not for me, for you. And if you're watching on YouTube later, then do the same thing. Thumbs up, please. Subscribe, hit the bell, because we do this every week. And that's a great way for you to just get a little nudge to know that there's some more content out there. Next week, Wednesday at midday, we're going to be talking about power in leadership. So what it means to have and to exercise power, and how you can influence other people in your leadership position using that. Okay. So thanks very much for watching LinkedIn Live Leadership number 18. We'll see you next week, Wednesday at midday, for LinkedIn Live Leadership number 19. We'll see you then.